That night, Chicago was cold enough to cut through skin. The wind from Lake Michigan swept along the empty streets, slamming against the windows of my old attic apartment, making the thin glass rattle like a tired sigh. In that cramped space, where a worn curtain divided the living room into a makeshift nursery, my son's cry shredded the silence apart. I shot up from the frayed sofa, my legs still heavy after a 12-hour shift at the diner. "Shh, I'm here, sweetheart." I lifted Jamie, feeling the heat radiating from his forehead. Hotter than usual, hotter than I could pretend not to worry about. 3 days ago, the doctor at the charity clinic said it was just a cold. But a mother's instincts are sharper than any diagnosis. Jamie's little body trembled, his fingers clinging weakly to my shirt in a way that made my heart clench. Rain tapped against the windows. The floor was damp from a leak in the ceiling. The whole apartment breathed a musty chill, while the only warmth I could hold on to was the small boy curled in my arms. I needed help. I needed money. I needed someone. But there was no one left. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking when they hovered over the name I'd deleted and saved again far too many times: Christopher. Jamie's father. The man who abandoned me the moment he learned I was pregnant. The man who had never once looked at his son. I'd gotten his new number 3 weeks ago at the cost of nearly half a day's wages. I'd sworn I would never call, unless I had no other choice. Tonight, I clearly had none. I pressed the number. Each ring felt like a dagger to my chest. 1, 2, 3. Hello? I froze. That voice wasn't Christopher's. It was deep, low, controlled, carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The kind of voice that rarely had to repeat itself. "Who's calling it? I'm looking for Christopher Reyes." No one by that name here. My body went rigid, and Jamie started wailing again against my shoulder. I forgot to hang up. Forgot the apology stuck on my lips. There was a pause on the other end. 1 second. 2. Then something shifted so subtle yet sharp enough to slice through the air between us. Was that a child? I held Jamie tighter, tears burning the corners of my eyes. Yes, my son. He has a fever. I didn't know why I told the truth. Maybe because his voice, though not warm, felt like it was listening, analyzing every detail with a precision that unsettled me. "You're calling the father at this hour to ask for help. My voice cracked. "He's not in the picture anymore." A silence followed. Not the silence of judgment, not pity, but the silence of someone calculating. "Your name?" I'm Victoria. Victoria Reynolds." He repeated it, as if tasting the shape of my existence in each syllable. Victoria. I didn't know why my heart slammed so hard when he said my name. "Where do you live?" I startled. "I need to hang up. I'm sorry, I dialed the wrong..." "Don't..." His voice dropped, firm, certain. "The child needs to be examined. You know he isn't doing well." I gripped the phone. "Who are you?" "Someone who can help. If you give me the address." A stranger. In the middle of the night. With a dangerous voice. Who would trust that I can't? "You can, and you will. For your son." Just one sentence, yet it struck the softest, most vulnerable place inside me. Jamie pressed his face into my neck, his cries fading from exhaustion. I couldn't take him to the ER again. I couldn't borrow more money. I couldn't watch him suffer. I just needed help. Just once. 17 minutes after I sent the address, a knock echoed through the apartment. Not a timid knock from a neighbor, not the irritated knock of the landlord. 3 knocks. Heavy, certain, the kind that assumed I would open the door. I peeked through the peephole. My heart stilled. A tall man stood in the dim hallway light. Black coat, sharp features carved in harsh shadows. His eyes dark, deep, cold, held the stillness of a winter lake. Behind him stood another man, twice as large, built like a professional bodyguard. The tall man lifted his head, looking directly at the peephole as if he knew exactly where I was. Victoria. Just one word. Yet it made my feet step back on their own. My hand shook so hard I almost dropped the lock when I opened the door. The man before me wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. He carried a quiet force, a dangerous calm, and a kind of power that made the entire hallway seem to shrink around him. "I'm Henry Sullivan," he said, stepping inside with slow but definitive steps. "And I'm here because of your son." The only thing I managed to whisper was, "You're not a doctor." Henry looked at me, his dark eyes tightening something inside my chest. "No, but the person who can save your child is in the car downstairs." He motioned to the man behind him who carried a medical kit and bowed slightly, as though used to midnight emergencies. Jamie whimpered. Henry stepped closer, his voice lowering, strangely steady. "Give me the boy." I clutched Jamie and stepped back. "Why should I trust you?" Henry tilted his head, meeting my eyes. No threat, no anger, not even impatience, just absolute certainty, because I showed up when his father didn't. I froze. Not because of that sentence, but because of what he said next, words that flipped my world upside down. And because the father used to work for me before he disappeared. My breath caught. Thoughts slipped like sand through my fingers. Jamie cried harder. I had no choice left. I placed my son in Henry Sullivan's arms. He held Jamie with surprising gentleness, an odd contrast to the cold danger he radiated. For a moment, something in his eyes shifted, as if the presence of a child touched a hidden fracture inside him. The medic worked fast, examining, treating, giving instructions, everything happening so efficiently it felt unreal, like my life was being rearranged by invisible hands. When it was over, Henry laid Jamie back onto the old mattress. Then he turned to me, dangerous, sharp, but not frightening. Something else, something that made my pulse trip. "Victoria." His voice sounded like a declaration, not a question, not a suggestion. "From now on, you and the boy are no longer safe in this apartment." I stepped back, barely breathing. "What are you talking about?" Henry moved closer, close enough for me to catch the warm, refined scent of ember and amber around him. "Christopher didn't just abandon you." He paused, then spoke slowly, clearly dropping each word like a blade hitting stone. "He betrayed me, and anyone looking for him may come looking for you." The room turned colder, and so did my heart. I understood. In that moment, my life and Jamie's would never again belong to peace. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. If Chicago was cold that night, then the moment I heard Henry Sullivan say, "My son and I were no longer safe here," I felt something colder than wind. It wasn't the chill of the air. It was the kind that crept along the spine, born from a truth I wasn't prepared to face. Henry stood before me, tall enough to block most of the dim yellow light in my old apartment. His shadow stretched across the floor, covering both me and my son like an invisible curtain. Jamie slept quietly in the doctor's arms. It was a strange image, a small child sleeping peacefully after being examined by a private doctor, inside an apartment so run down it wasn't worth anyone's attention, all because I dialed the wrong number. Or perhaps, not just because of that. I forced myself to breathe, steadying my voice. "You're saying the people looking for Christopher will come after me, but why I don't know anything about him?" Henry looked straight at me, his dark eyes observing, measuring every flicker of emotion on my face. "It doesn't matter what you know. It matters what they think you know." My throat tightened. God, was this really happening? "But you're the one he betrayed." "Correct," Henry replied calmly, as if stating a fact about the weather. "Which is exactly why others will assume he came to you before he ran." I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold down the shaking in my chest. Why would they think that? Because you're the only thing he hasn't completely destroyed. The words landed hard, too precise, too sharp, like Henry had seen straight through the fragile places I tried to hide. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to argue. But there were too many things I didn't understand. Then, what do? I whispered, barely audible. Henry was silent for a few seconds. Then he walked toward the window, pulling the thin curtain aside. Streetlight washed across half his face, outlining features so sharply defined they bordered on ruthless. You're leaving this place. My stomach tightened. Where Henry turned back to me, his gaze met mine, not annoyed, not impatient, not forceful, just certain, absolutely certain. Somewhere I've prepared for you. I stepped back. You don't get to decide where I live. Henry didn't get angry. He simply tilted his head, studying me like someone watching a child face something too big to grasp. I know. His voice softened in a way that startled me. But you handed me that responsibility the moment you called my number at 2 a.m. The statement felt like truth and judgment, I murmured, almost pleading I didn't mean to call you. Some calls don't need to be intentional. His voice deepened. But they still change everything. The doctor gently placed Jamie in a makeshift cradle of pillows and blankets. My son breathed evenly now, cheeks still warm from the fever, but resting peacefully. I looked at him, then at Henry. Why did you come? Exhaustion roughened my voice. You don't know me. You don't know Jamie. You don't owe us anything. Henry looked down at the leather gloves he'd just removed, turning them over in his hands as if weighing something invisible. You're right. A small pause. But I despise men who abandon their children. It wasn't a casual opinion. There was depth in it, a shadow from some part of his past carved into his chest. I didn't know what to say. I only knew that something in those words tightened my throat, an emotion that was neither pity nor gratitude, but an instinctive desire to understand him more. I lowered my voice. So that's why you're helping me. Henry lifted his eyes. His gaze swept through me like a cold gust sharp enough to make my skin prickle. No, I'm helping your child. He paused. As for you, we'll settle that later. I swallowed hard. What did that mean? Settle what? But I didn't dare ask. Not out of fear, out of not knowing if I truly wanted the answer. Henry signaled to the man behind him. Mark, bring the bags. I watched as Mark left, leaving Henry alone in my tiny apartment. Henry Sullivan. A name whispered in vague stories about Chicago's underworld, a man known as the Quiet Storm. I had never imagined meeting him, much less having him step into my life like this. But now he was here standing between me and the sleeping child who meant everything to me, and everything I knew about safety had already collapsed. Victoria! Henry called my name just as I was staring at the stairwell where Mark had disappeared. Are you ready to leave tonight? I turned sharply. Right now. That's insane. Henry crossed his arms, posture steady and calm, so calm it made me more on edge. I'm not insane, but I have belongings. Nothing in this apartment is worth dying for. I froze. You're trying to scare me. No. Henry stepped forward. His height forced me to tilt my chin up, but it was the closeness, the faint scent of burning wood and amber that unsettled me most. I'm telling you the truth, and truth is always more frightening than threats. My chest tightened with each heavy heartbeat. I wanted to refuse, yet the terrifying part was, I knew he was right. When Mark returned with a large leather bag, Henry nodded. Where are the boys' things? I scrambled to grab Jamie's diapers. A few outfits, his bottle, everything old but usable. Henry reached for the bag, and his hand brushed mine. Just a second, but enough to pull one beat sharply out of my chest. Then he said something that made my knees weaken, not out of fear, but from something I couldn't quite name. You're not alone anymore. I shook my head. You can't say that. You don't know anything about me. Henry looked at me with a quiet depth that made my breath halt. I know enough. Enough to know that you've been fighting alone for too long." The words struck with painful accuracy. I wanted to cry not because they were sweet, but because they were true. Before I could respond, Mark lifted Jamie carefully, as if holding something precious. Henry's voice dropped back into command. "Let's go." "Wait." I panicked. "I can't go with someone I know nothing about." Henry cut me off, not harshly, but with a strange, gentle firmness. "Then let me start." He stepped closer, close enough that his breath mingled with the air I breathed. "My name is Henry Sullivan. I'm not a good man." He paused, a pause that made my skin prickle. "But I don't let children suffer for adults' mistakes." He stepped back, letting me see his eyes clearly. They weren't just dark. They held an old grief buried so deep it glimmered only when he let his guard slip. "If you want to keep your son safe," he said slowly, "trusting me is the best choice you have." I looked at Jamie in Mark's arms. His little lips moved in his sleep, searching for a familiar sound. Then I looked at Henry, a man who had stepped out of the shadows, dangerous yet unmistakably sincere. In one thing, he wasn't lying. In the end, all I could do was whisper, "If my son is safe, I'll go." Henry nodded once. "Good." A faint curve touched his mouth, almost a smile. "From now on, you'll be under my protection." I couldn't tell whether the shiver running through me came from fear or something far more dangerous. A stranger, a secret tied to my child's father, a threat I couldn't yet see, and a silent storm named Henry Sullivan moving inevitably toward me. Chicago lay under a thin veil of night as Henry led me and Jamie down to the parking garage behind my building. The silence was so deep that the sound of his footsteps echoed sharply across the cold concrete floor. The metal door opened, revealing a sleek black SUV, the kind of vehicle that didn't appear in neighborhoods like mine unless it had a very specific purpose. Mark opened the back door and placed Jamie into a specialized child seat that had already been set up. I didn't dare ask when it had been prepared. A man like Henry rarely let anything happen without anticipating it first. I stood by the car door, gripping the strap of my bag so tightly my fingers hurt. Henry looked at me under the dim yellow light of the garage. "Victoria." Just one word. Yet his voice made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't explain. "Are you all right?" I let out a thin, humorless laugh, not sarcastic, just the kind of laugh a person gives when trying not to collapse. "All right, I'm leaving my home at 2:30 in the morning with a complete stranger. Do you think I'm all right?" Henry tilted his head, his expression darkening not with anger, but with something like understanding. "I think you're braver than anyone I've ever met." I froze, not because of the words, but because of the way he looked at me when he said them. Clear, steady, as if he genuinely saw me. No one had ever called me brave. No one had ever looked at my life with that kind of understanding. I looked away, slipped into the car. Henry circled to the driver's seat, Mark beside him, and I sat in the back holding Jamie. The SUV pulled out of the garage. Chicago blurred past the windows like an old black and white film. Empty streets, dim streetlights stretching long reflections across the lake. I watched the city slip by, trying to keep myself calm. Henry drove with perfect composure back straight, one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely on his thigh. But beneath the calm was something taut like a coiled wire, constantly aware of every detail. Sometimes he glanced at the rearview mirror, and his eyes would meet mine for a split second before looking away, as if he was weighing something he couldn't say out loud. I finally broke the silence. "Where are we going?" Henry didn't hesitate. "Riverside District, your temporary residence." I frowned. Temporary? Until things stabilize. And what exactly is... The situation, Henry kept his eyes ahead. Some people are searching for Christopher. If he made it out of Chicago, they'll look for anyone he might have contacted. But I haven't been in his life for years. Henry's reply was soft, but sharp as a blade. Truth matters less than perception. A shiver ran through me. After a moment, I asked, Do you actually believe I don't know anything about what he was involved in?" Henry was quiet for several seconds. Then he said something that stopped my heart for a beat. "If I thought you were involved, I wouldn't be here." It wasn't just reassurance. It felt like something solid, heavy, like an invisible hand resting on my shoulder, grounding me. The SUV turned onto a quiet riverside street. LED lights illuminated the wet pavement, creating shimmering pools of white like moonlight scattered on water. Ahead stood a tall, glass-fronted building, so elegant it looked like a frame stolen from a Hollywood movie. I muttered Henry. I stared at the stunning architecture. This is definitely not a place I can live. Henry turned off the engine and looked at me. In that moment, the faint light caught his eyes, making them gleam with something unreadable. "Victoria," he said slowly, clearly, "this is the safest place I can offer you. Not the nicest, not the prettiest, not the most expensive, the safest." Henry stepped out. A gust of cold wind slipped into the car, carrying the scent of the river and the faint warmth of his coat smoke and musk, dark and comforting. Mark carried Jamie into the elevator first. Henry and I stepped in after him. The gold-tinted elevator lights sharpened the angles of his face. I saw the clenched line of his jaw, the tension beneath the calm, the quiet vigilance of a man who never let himself rest. "Henry," I whispered, "why do you care about us like this?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked at me for so long I could hear my own heartbeat echo. Then he said softly, "Because I know what it feels like to be abandoned." I froze. Something cracked behind the calm in his eyes when he said that, a pain old enough to settle, deep enough to be familiar. I lowered my gaze. "I didn't call you to be a burden." Henry leaned slightly closer, not touching me, but close enough that I felt the warmth of him. "You're not a burden." He paused, breath steady. "You're the reason I walked out of a meeting tonight." I looked up, startled. Henry continued, voice low, almost like a confession. "You called at the exact moment I was forgetting who I used to be." I couldn't speak. My pulse felt like it was being held in his hand. The apartment on the 21st floor opened with warm lighting, pale wood floors, and elegant interior design. Too beautiful. Too perfect. Too far from the life I knew. Mark placed Jamie in a crib prepared in the smaller bedroom. I stood in the living room, overwhelmed, unsure where to even put my hands. Henry stood at the doorway, watching me take in the space like a man watching light enter a room that had been dark for too long. "You can stay here as long as you need." I turned. "Henry, I can't repay you." He walked toward me. Close. Too close. I instinctively backed up until my spine touched the cool marble counter. Henry placed his hands on the counter, one on each side of me, forming a circle around me without actually touching me. "I'm not asking for anything in return," I whispered. "Then what do you want?" Henry looked into me deep enough to make my breath catch. "I want to know that tonight. I made the right choice." My heart dropped. His face was close enough that I could see the reflection of the city lights in his eyes, and something I never expected to find there: sincerity. Not weakness, not pity, not obligation, but a small, steady flame in the dark. I inhaled shakily. Thank you." Henry held my gaze a heartbeat longer before stepping back just enough space for me to breathe again. "Victoria," he said near the door. "If anything unusual happens, any noise, any message, any movement, you call me immediately." I nodded. Henry placed his hand on the door handle. But before he left, he said something that pinned me in place like a nail through wood. "From the moment you called me, you became something I can't walk away from." The door closed behind him. The apartment was wide, warm, and safe, but it pulsed with a different kind of tension. A heat that climbed up my ears and made my heart skip a beat. Not fear, not suspicion. But because Henry Sullivan, the man who stepped out of the dark, had just made me believe in something far more dangerous than the night I dialed the wrong number. The first night in the Riverside District apartment drifted by slowly, as if time itself was watching me, waiting to see what I would do with this unfamiliar world. Jamie slept soundly in the warm room, the little cloud-shaped nightlight casting a soft yellow glow across his now less flushed cheeks. It was such a peaceful sight that I didn't dare breathe too loudly. I stood beside his bed, watching his small face, a cooling patch on his left ear like a tiny cartoon sticker. "You're safe now," I whispered. The word safe had become so precious that it made the bridge of my nose sting. I closed his door gently and stepped into the living room, so spacious that my footsteps echoed faintly, sounding out of place. The apartment was beautiful in an unreal way, polished wooden floors, enormous glass windows overlooking a river so dark it gleamed like obsidian. Outside, the city was hushed, and only the rain tapping on the balcony railing broke the silence. I folded my arms, standing alone in that elegant space. My chest tightened with a mix of gratitude, doubt, and something even more indistinct. Henry Sullivan. His name spread in my mind like ink soaking slowly into paper, darkening with each minute that passed. I shouldn't think about him so much. Shouldn't remember the look in his eyes when he said, "From the moment you called me," shouldn't let the tiniest details about him unsettle me. I pressed my nails lightly into my palm to ground myself. But reality wasn't any kinder. Not because of the apartment, not because of the night, but because I felt I wasn't alone. I turned on the kitchen light and poured a glass of water. Just as I lifted it to my lips, a faint sound echoed from the hallway outside. Not the elevator, not a door shutting. A soft click, like a footstep trying to stay silent, but not silent enough. I set the glass down slowly and listened. The apartment stilled. Too still. I glanced at the security camera in the corner. Henry had called it my protection system. The monitor showed no alerts, no motion detection. But my instincts, sharpened by years of surviving in rough neighborhoods, and by becoming a mother, bristled instantly. I stepped toward the front door and peered through the peephole. Nothing, just the carpeted hallway, dim golden lights, and quiet doors. But the moment I lowered my gaze, my stomach dropped. Outside my door, the carpet had a thin, wet trail, like someone had been standing there, fresh from the rain. I swallowed hard. Henry had warned me. He said people looking for Christopher might come. I forced myself not to panic. It could be a resident, a technician, a delivery mistake. But who stood silently at someone's door in the middle of a storm and didn't knock? I stepped back, heart pounding loud enough to ring in my ears. I reached for my phone. My trembling thumb hovered over Henry's name. But I hesitated. Don't act too helpless in front of a man like Henry. I wasn't sure if that was good advice. Only that I felt, if I called him now, I'd be admitting I was depending on him too much. I just needed 1 minute. 1 minute to think. Ding, the elevator stopped on the 21st floor. I spun toward the door. Footsteps followed, heavy, steady, slow, not rushed. Then came the knock. 3 knocks. Exact, even, firm, just like the first time I met him. I tightened my grip on the phone, approached the door, and looked through the peephole. My heart nearly burst with relief. Henry. He stood there in the hallway, his coat damp with rain, his hair slightly wet, and his eyes sharp like he'd stepped out of a different storm entirely. I opened the door, but before I could speak, he did. "Why didn't you call me?" I blinked, startled. Call you?" Henry walked inside. Mark wasn't with him. He removed his gloves and set them on the table, looking me over from head to toe. His gaze paused on my hand still shaking slightly. Someone stood outside this apartment for 4 minutes. His voice was deep, low, and edged. The motion detection system alerted me. I went rigid. Who was it? Henry stepped closer, not in a threatening way, but enough for his warmth to fill the space between us. If I knew who it was, I wouldn't be asking you. I bit my lip. I thought it was just someone passing by. Henry looked at me for a long moment. His eyes didn't show anger, but something close to disappointment or worry. Victoria. He said my name lightly as velvet, but every syllable felt heavy as lead. Do not underestimate how dangerous this is. I lowered my head. I'm sorry. Henry exhaled, shedding his hardness for a brief second. He reached out and gently touched my wrist, right over the frantic pulse. A light touch. Barely there. But enough to make me forget. For one moment, what I was afraid of. You're shaking. He murmured. I stepped back instinctively but bumped into the counter. Henry stood less than a step away. His eyes weren't intrusive, but there was warmth there and unexpected tenderness that didn't belong to a man who commanded the underworld. I'm not scared. I stammered. You are. Henry's voice softened even more. And there's nothing shameful about that. I looked up at him. And for a moment, everything around us stilled. The yellow light cast shadows across his sharp features, highlighting a hint of exhaustion beneath his calm. Suddenly, Henry bent down, picked up a small towel from the sofa, and handed it to me. Dry your hands. His voice was barely above a whisper. I don't like seeing you shake like this. My heart flipped not because of the gesture, but because his concern wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, precise, and somehow more overwhelming because of it. When I finished drying my hands, Henry moved to the door, checking the locks, recalibrating the system. I'll have the entire floor's security replaced in the morning. You don't need to. I tried to sound firm, but my voice wasn't strong enough. Henry glanced over his shoulder. Dark eyes steady. I wasn't asking. I rolled my eyes slightly, part defiance, part embarrassment. Do you always make decisions like that? Henry turned fully, crossing his arms, leaning back against the wall, a stance that said the world should listen to him. Only when that's the only way to keep someone safe. There was something dangerous about a man saying that in the way Henry said it. Not boastful, not gallant, not performative, just true. I asked softly, Henry, how many people are looking for Christopher? Henry was silent for several seconds. Enough that I won't let you stay here alone. I closed my eyes. A feeling was growing inside me. Not fear, but something tied to Henry himself. He wasn't just protecting me. He was stepping into my life as if it had been inevitable. I opened my eyes. Henry was watching me, his gaze like a still lake under a cold night sky. Don't disappear from my sight like that again. His voice dropped. I don't like guessing whether you're safe. I whispered. I don't belong to you for you to worry like that. Henry took one step toward me. Not fast, not forceful, but enough to shrink the room in a heartbeat. Victoria. His voice was soft, controlled. I don't care whether you belong to me or not. He stopped inches away, lowering his head slightly. But I know I won't let you vanish from my life again. Again. My heart jolted. What does that mean? Henry brushed his fingers against my hair. Just a fleeting touch, but it ran down my spine like electricity. He leaned closer, his breath brushing my temple. There are things. I'll tell you when the time is right. Before I could ask more, a notification buzzed in his pocket. He checked his phone, his expression darkening. I have to go. At the door. He turned back and the look he gave me made my knees weaken. Victoria, don't open the door for anyone, even if they say they know me. I nodded, my palms damp with sweat. Henry placed a small metal keycard on the table. This is my access card. If anything happens, scan it at the door. I'll be alerted immediately. He stepped out. But just before the door shut, he spoke without looking back. Get some sleep. I'll come back. The door closed. Silence settled over the apartment. But my heart refused to settle. Because in that final moment when Henry looked at me, I realized something far more terrifying than the stranger in the hallway. I was starting to want him to come back. I couldn't sleep after Henry left. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock. The soft ceiling light cast warm shadows on the polished wooden floor, patches of light and dark weaving together, like my own heart, peaceful yet restless. Safe yet missing him in a way I didn't understand. Jamie slept deeply. Small breaths. Steady and calm. Only I was falling apart. Every time I closed my eyes, Henry's voice echoed through me. I won't let you disappear from my life again. Again, I had never met him before. Never known he existed beyond the icy rumors in the news. Yet that sentence, so personal, so deliberate, sent a tremor through me I couldn't shake. I rested my head against the sofa, pulling a blanket around myself, trying to calm my heartbeat. That was when a tiny ping sounded from the security system. I shot upright. Not the elevator. Not a knock. A warning. I rushed to the monitor, a red dot flashing on the 21st floor hallway. Someone was standing at the door. My breath caught. I switched to the camera feed. A blurred face under dim hallway lights. Tall, lean, light blonde hair dampened by rain. And God, he was looking straight at the camera. A twisted grin curled on his lips, as if he knew I was watching him. I stumbled back from the screen on instinct. My hands shook so badly I dropped my phone. By the time I picked it up, the screen lit with one name, Henry Sullivan, calling. My fingers trembled as I answered. Victoria. Henry's voice was quick, sharp, metallic. Someone is standing outside your door. I swallowed hard. I saw him. Silence. Not confusion. Not fear. A predator calculating. Lock every door. Henry's voice dropped deep, low, dangerous enough to make my body tense. It's locked, I whispered. Don't stand near it. Step back 5 steps. No 10. I obeyed, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. Mark and my men are on the way. I'm on my way too. I'm 3 minutes from you. 3 minutes. Such a small number, utterly meaningless when a stranger was at my door. I heard Henry switching lines, issuing commands in a voice that cut like steel. Don't let him leave the building. At any cost. I held my breath. Then Henry returned to me. Victoria, are you still with me? Yes. Keep breathing. I'm coming. Then footsteps. Slow. Unsteady. Not Henry. Not Mark. Not anyone with good intentions. My shaking worsened. Henry, I'm here. His voice softened instantly, melting into something warm and protective. You're okay. I've got you. I pressed myself against the wall, forcing each breath out of my tightening chest. He's doing something, I whispered. He's right against the door. I hear metal. Henry's voice turned into a low murmur, so intimate it felt like his breath was brushing my ear. Listen to me. Do not move. Do not make a sound. I bit my lip until I tasted blood to keep from gasping. Moments later, the footsteps stopped. The camera stopped detecting motion. The hallway went still. He was gone. But the feeling he was close, too close, remained. I trembled. Henry, is he gone? Henry didn't answer immediately. Then, don't look outside. Don't open that door. I'm here. The elevator dinged. My heart dropped. I didn't know if it was him or Henry. I wrapped my arms around myself. 10 seconds later, a knock. 3 knocks. Strong, even, exact. I ran to the monitor. Henry. Rain soaking his coat, hair falling over his forehead, eyes darker than the storm outside. I opened the door. For a moment, Henry just looked at me. No words, no questions, no touch. His eyes moved from my pale face to my shaking hands, and something deep and violent sparked behind his gaze, not at me, but at the world that made me this afraid. Henry stepped inside without waiting for permission. He slammed the door shut and locked it. Mark moved down the hallway to check the perimeter. In all the chaos, The only sound I truly heard was my heartbeat. Henry turned back to me. "Victoria." His voice was low, warm, tight with barely contained control. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, though my shoulders were trembling. Henry lifted his hand slow, cautious, as if afraid of frightening me, and touched my cheek, cold fingertips. But the gesture, unbearably warm. "You're freezing." His voice dropped to something meant only for me. "Why didn't you call me immediately?" I whispered. "Didn't want to bother you." Henry's expression changed instantly. Not anger, not annoyance, something far more disarming. He leaned down so his eyes aligned with mine. "Victoria, you're not a burden. You're never a bother. Do you understand?" My voice got stuck in my throat, not because I was scared, because his sincerity left no room for lies. I wasn't okay, and I truly needed him here. Henry whispered so soft it felt like a confession. "When the camera alerted me, I thought I was going to lose you." My heart stuttered violently. "Henry, what are you saying?" He didn't step back. His hands closed gently around my shoulders, steadying me as my knees weakened. "I'm saying it drove me insane, and I'm not letting that happen again." The space between us shrank until I could feel his breath ghost across my lips. Henry spoke slowly, truthfully. "Tonight, I thought the most important thing I could lose was you." I stood frozen, my heart squeezed tight, then released in the same instant. I wanted to ask, why since when? So many questions. But I didn't get the chance. Mark returned. "Boss." Cameras on the lower floor show he left through the emergency stairwell. "We're tracking him now." Danger flickered in Henry's eyes. "Find him. Don't let him come near this floor again." Mark nodded and left. The door shut. Henry turned back to me, the emotion still in his eyes, undeniable, unhidden. I saw it clearly. He was afraid. Afraid for me. Henry stepped closer. "Victoria, from tonight on, I'm not leaving this place if you're still shaking like this." I opened my mouth to object, but Henry's fingers brushed mine. A soft touch. Barely anything, but enough to erase every argument I had. His voice dropped even lower, almost a confession. "Not because of responsibility," he paused one heartbeat, "but because I can't bear the thought of losing you again. Not even once more." I looked into Henry's eyes, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the dark hallway outside, only afraid that if Henry walked away again, my heart wouldn't stand a chance. After Mark left, the apartment fell back into its familiar quiet. But this time, it didn't feel lonely, not even close. Henry stood a few steps away, yet his presence filled the entire room warm, solid, powerful in a way that wrapped around every corner. I sat on the sofa, my hands still trembling slightly. Henry walked toward me slowly, not rushed, not imposing, as if he knew he was stepping into the most fragile part of me, and respected it. "You're still shaking," he said, his low voice softening the air between us. "I'm fine," I lied, so obviously I heard it myself. Henry didn't argue. He simply sat beside me, keeping a respectful distance but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. Silence settled between us. Henry watched my hands clasped tightly together, then spoke gently. "Victoria, being afraid is all right. Fear belongs to someone worth protecting, not someone weak." I didn't know why, but those words tightened my throat. "I'm used to handling everything on my own," I whispered. Henry tilted his head, his eyes dark and deep like the night beyond the window. "That's the problem," he murmured. "You're so used to being strong that no one realizes when you need someone else's hand." My heart jolted not from fear, but from the startling feeling of being seen. I looked away, unable to face that truth. Henry didn't touch me, but his next words nearly made my eyes sting. "I'm here. Tonight. And on any night you need, until you can breathe normally again. A simple promise. But it felt like someone had just placed a warm hand over the coldest part of my loneliness. Jamie whimpered softly from the small bedroom. Instinctively, I jumped to my feet, but Henry reached the door first. He looked at me, a look that said, "Let me make sure it's safe. Not controlling, not claiming, protecting." I nodded. Henry walked into Jamie's room. The soft wall light cast his shadow on the floor, the silhouette of a strong man bending gently over a tiny crib. My chest tightened at the sight. Henry placed a hand lightly on Jamie's chest, checking his breathing with a practiced ease that made me stand there, speechless. "Just a dream," he murmured, voice so warm I felt calmer too. Jamie shifted in his sleep and grabbed Henry's wrist. His tiny fingers curled around the steel watch on Henry's arm, as if he'd known him forever. Henry stared at that tiny hand holding on to him, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Something raw, deep, fragile, a crack in the steel walls he always carried. He tucked Jamie's blanket around him and stepped out. We returned to the sofa. Henry was quiet, his hands clasped loosely, his posture less like a mafia kingpin and more like a man wrestling with something he'd buried for years. "Victoria," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." I turned to him. Henry rarely said he needed anything. "The man who stood at your door tonight." He paused. He wasn't a thief or someone passing by. My heart punched painfully against my ribs. "He knew your name." Henry continued. "He knew who Jamie is, and he knew your connection to me." My breath hitched. "You mean we're in danger because of you?" Henry met my eyes, a storm restrained. "No," he said slowly. "You're in danger because they think you're the only weakness I have." I sat up rigid. His weakness? Why, Henry leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. That night, when I heard Jamie crying through the phone, his breath caught a rare break in his control. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't shut off the instinct to protect you both. I held my breath. Henry's voice dropped. Intimate. People noticed that change in me, and that's why he showed up tonight. A cold shiver ran down my spine, not from fear, from realizing Henry's feelings for me had already placed us in a danger far greater than I'd imagined. Without thinking, I placed my hand over his, then startled at my own action and began to pull away. But Henry held on to my hand. His hand was large, warm, strong, but his grip, gentle, as if he feared hurting me. I thought, my voice trembled. "You didn't let anyone into your life." Henry lowered his head, his eyes heavy with an exhaustion I'd never seen. "I didn't." He tightened his hold slightly. "Not until you called my number by mistake." A faint smile touched his lips. Not quite amusement, but the smile of someone who'd realized fate had played a cruel trick on him. Henry leaned back, but he didn't release my hand. Silence stretched soft, warm, strangely intimate. Then he spoke again, barely above a whisper. "I had a younger brother, different father, same mother." I stared at him, shocked. I had never heard anything about Henry's family, only the dark legend of his name. Henry's voice deepened, quiet but heavy. "He died because of me." The words were soft, but they crushed the air between us. I turned fully toward him, holding his hand with both of mine. "Henry, how?" He looked into my eyes, and for a heartbeat, I saw the barest piece of his soul. He was taken because he tried to help me, killed because he tried to protect me. He inhaled sharply, closing his eyes for a brief moment. Since then, I never allowed anyone close. No one. I understood. My heart understood before my mind did. He lost the only person he ever tried to protect, and that wound followed him like a shadow through the years. Henry opened his eyes, his voice gentler that night, hearing your panic, hearing Jamie cry. He leaned closer. I knew I was about to make the same mistake. I whispered, "You mean letting someone into your life again?" Henry whispered back, "Letting someone become important enough to be my weakness." I didn't know whether that made my heart ache or melt. Maybe both. I spoke softly. "If I'm your weakness, what will you do?" He didn't blink. "Protect you. At any cost." I went completely still. Henry held my gaze so long I forgot to breathe. Then he asked quiet, steady, unbearably sincere Victoria, "I want to stay here tonight. Is that all right?" Not a command, not an assumption. A request from a man asking permission to shield me in the only way he knew how. I nodded. Henry didn't smile, but his hand tightened around mine just slightly. A silent exhale of something locked deep inside him. He stood. "I'll take the sofa. You, get some sleep. I'll be right here." I walked toward the bedroom, but stopped. I turned back. Henry had taken off his coat, set his gun on the table, and sat on the sofa bathed in warm yellow light. He looked up, waiting for something I might say. All I whispered was, "Thank you for coming back." Henry answered quietly. I didn't have another choice. When I closed the bedroom door behind me, one truth settled deep in my chest. Tonight, Henry Sullivan wasn't staying to reassure me. He was staying because he, too, was afraid that if he walked away again, he might lose me. I woke to the first rays of morning slipping through the blinds. No more rain pounding against the windows. No more security alerts from last night, just warm sunlight. Soft as a whisper, tempting me to believe everything had only been a bad dream. But it wasn't. The faint metallic click from the living room reminded me Henry was out there, awake, on guard. I opened the bedroom door, my bare feet touching the cool wooden floor. Henry stood with his back to me, sleeves rolled up, the veins on his forearm visible as he tightened the strap of his gun holster. His tall figure stood framed in the morning light, no longer the terrifying shadow of the night before, but the man who made the entire room feel brighter. He turned when he heard the door. His gaze softened instantly. "You're awake." Henry's voice was low, still tinged with that rough edge of someone who hadn't slept at all. I nodded slightly. "Did you sleep at all?" Henry looked at me for 1 second, and that alone told me the answer was no. But he only said quietly, "I'm fine." He never told the truth about the things that wear him down. And I was slowly realizing that was the way he'd learned to survive. Jamie was awake, kicking happily in the crib, babbling to himself. I scooped him up, and Henry stood behind me, hands in his pockets, a softness in his eyes that I rarely saw, a softness reserved only for this child. "He looks better today," he said in a tone of someone who had monitored every breath the baby took through the night. Something warm slipped through my chest. I was getting used to Henry being there every morning, and that was terrifying in its own way. The morning passed with an unsettling calm. I made coffee, and Henry leaned against the kitchen counter, phone in hand, though his eyes kept returning to me. Not possessive, not analyzing, just checking, making sure I was all right after the night we'd had. He waited for me to speak first. "You're heading out?" I asked, noticing him adjusting his holster again. Henry lifted his gaze. "I have things to deal with." His things I already knew weren't office work. "Is it about the man from last night?" I whispered. Henry watched me for a long moment. His eyes still carried the darkness of last night. He spoke slowly. "He won't come back, and I won't let you be afraid again." My heart dropped a beat. Before leaving, Henry gave a short instruction, simple, ordinary, but enough to make my chest tremble. "Lock the door, and don't open it for anyone except me." Then he left, and the apartment grew so silent. I could hear my own anxiety breathing. Around noon, I took the elevator down to pick up a package of diapers for Jamie. Elena couldn't come today, so I went myself. The lobby was elegant and quiet. I signed for the package, then turned toward the elevator. Jamie in my arms when the sharp sound of high heels echoed behind me. Not the footsteps of a typical resident. These were crisp, confident, cutting, belonging to someone who never slowed down for anyone. A woman appeared in front of the elevator. She was stunning enough to make me freeze. Long black hair, red lips, a beige coat draped over a tall, slender figure. Her posture razor sharp, so perfect she made everyone else look out of place. Her eyes landed on me, then on Jamie, and they turned cold. Victoria Reynolds. Her voice was smooth, but sharp like a newly sharpened blade. I inhaled unsteadily. I'm the woman Henry was supposed to meet this morning. Her smile lifted, beautiful, but merciless. But he had to stay in your apartment. Overnight, Jamie tugged my hair, babbling innocently. My legs suddenly felt ice cold. Henry had said he stayed for safety. This woman made it sound like something else entirely. She stepped closer, eyes scanning me like I was an object of insignificant value. I heard the story, she said coolly. About the wrong number, leading to everything that wasn't a mistake at all. My chest tightened. She knew about the call. About last night, about me. Her smile sharpened. Henry has a protector's instinct. She emphasized each word. He protects the weak. It's his habit. And his weakness. I held Jamie closer. She stepped so near I could smell her expensive magnolia perfume. But don't think he's different from his world. Her voice dropped lower. In that world, women like you don't survive long if you stand too close to a man like Henry Sullivan. Jamie tugged at my collar, murmuring, "Ma." I jerked slightly. The woman's lips tightened, as if restraining irritation. Henry said you were smart. Her eyes cooled even further. Then act smart. Leave before this spirals beyond control. My heartbeat slammed in my ears. He will never let you get hurt, she continued, bitterness dripping from her voice. But Henry can't protect you from people like me. I instinctively stepped back. Tightening my hold on Jamie, her eyes gleamed with twisted amusement. Good. Single mothers always have sharp instincts. Then she leaned close so near her whisper slid straight down my spine. Henry belongs to a world you will never reach, and he is not the only one who gets to decide who stands beside him. The elevator doors opened. She stepped back, smoothed her coat, never looking away from me. Enjoy your last peaceful days. Victoria? The doors closed, and I stood frozen in the middle of the lobby, heart racing, Jamie whimpering softly as he sensed my tension. Back in the apartment, I locked the door, leaned against the wall, my breaths uneven. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped Jamie. I placed him gently on the sofa, took a long breath, and reached for my phone. Part of me wanted to stay silent, to pretend none of that had happened. But her eyes, those icy, merciless eyes, kept stabbing into my mind, women like you don't live long in his world. I pressed Henry's name. He answered immediately. Victoria, just hearing his voice made tears slip down my cheeks. Something happened. My voice trembled like a plucked string. Henry's tone shifted at once, deep, sharp, fully alert. Who approached you? I swallowed. Breath shaky. A woman. She knew my name. She knew you stayed here last night. And she said, I'm not safe next to you. There was 1 second of silence. Just one. But it was enough for me to know Henry recognized who she was. He inhaled slowly, voice so low it gave me chills. Victoria, listen to me. Yes, don't open the door. Don't step outside. Don't let anyone near the baby. I gripped the phone harder, my chest tightening. Henry spoke again. Every word like a vow carved in steel. I'm on my way back. And this time, a breath, heavy, dangerous. I won't let anyone touch you, not even her. I held Jamie in my arms while waiting for Henry to return. The apartment was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the silence before a storm, something invisible, tense, ready to shatter the moment that door opened. Jamie sucked on his fingers, wide eyes blinking at me without looking away. He could feel my fear, so he clung to my shirt, refusing to let go. All I could do was kiss the top of his warm little head. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here. And Henry is on his way." The moment the sentence left my lips, the lock clicked. I spun around. Henry stepped inside, his face set in a hardness I had never seen before. Not anger, not impatience, but something deeper, darker. A rage with direction. A rage with purpose. A rage that wanted to find someone and make them pay. He shut the door and locked all 3 latches. He didn't speak. He only looked at me, at my messy hair, the faint trembling in my fingers, the way Jamie was clinging to my chest. His eyes darkened, but when he stepped closer, his voice softened in a way that contrasted sharply with that cold, deadly expression. "Let me see." I blinked. See what Henry extended his arms. "Jamie?" I hesitated, then placed the baby into his arms. And what happened next tightened something deep inside my chest. Henry held Jamie as if he'd done it 100 times, not clumsy, not unfamiliar. He supported the baby's back with one hand, held his head gently with the other. Jamie touched Henry's cheek and giggled. A child's laughter could soften any heart, even Henry's. He looked at the baby for a few moments, then lifted his eyes to me. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." His tone was calm, but every word felt like it was being held together over a burning fuse. I swallowed, then recounted everything, the woman approaching me, her cold eyes, her threat, her whisper that I wouldn't live long in his world. Henry listened silently, very silently, but the muscle in his jaw clenched, unclenched, reclenched until I feared he might grind his own fury into dust. When I finished, he gently returned Jamie to my arms and stood up wide-eyed. He changed instantly. Gone were the softness and the tenderness he had shown the baby, and me. In their place was the man who walked into battle as if it were the only life he knew. "Did she give a name?" Henry asked, his voice lower than the wind outside. "No, but she said you were supposed to meet her this morning." Henry let out a cold, humorless laugh, so sharp it made a chill crawl down my spine. "Of course she did. You know who she is." He didn't answer immediately. He walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring down at the city. His shoulders were tight, his spine rigid like a blade, and his left hand gripped the back of a chair until the veins stood out. Then he spoke, still facing away Ariana. The name dropped like a shard of ice. My chest tightened. "Ariana." Henry turned around, walked toward me, and stopped right in front of me. "She grew up with me." His voice held no emotion, and somehow, that emotionless tone frightened me more. He continued, "Our families made a promise once. A promise I never agreed to, but was expected to accept. I understood immediately. A marriage arrangement. A union of power. A future someone had written for Henry, and he had been fighting to escape it." Henry's gaze softened, "But only for me, Victoria. I didn't choose her. I never have." His words were quiet, but I could hear years of resistance and a hint of exhaustion behind them. "But she thinks I belong to her." Henry continued, "She knows everyone in my world considers her the right person to stand beside me. And she believes that if she removes everyone else—" He paused for one heartbeat. "That includes you." A cold shiver ran down my back. "How dangerous is she?" Henry didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering himself until our eyes were level. "Dangerous enough that I need to change every plan I made for today." I tightened my hold on Jamie. "What are you going to do?" Henry looked at me, long enough that I knew he was choosing between what was right and what was safe, two concepts that rarely coexisted in his life. Then he said, "Get you and the baby out of the city." The room tilted. "Leave the city tonight." Henry's tone left no room for negotiation. I let everything here get too close to you, too dangerous. After last night, Ariana isn't just interested anymore. He held my gaze. She wants to destroy you. My heart pounded, confused and terrified. But one question slipped out before I could stop it. And you, are you coming with us? Henry leaned down close enough that I felt the warmth of his breath brush against my skin. I'm not letting another man's child and his mother run for their lives alone. I stiffened. Another man's child. But he said it like the words lodged painfully in his throat. I opened my mouth. But Henry lifted a hand and touched my cheek. The simple touch dissolved every question I had. His voice dropped deeper, wearier, intimate in a way only someone who cared could sound. I'm going with you. Not as anything else, but as the man who puts your life before his own. My throat tightened. Jamie reached for Henry's shirt, laughing as if announcing a truth neither of us had the courage to speak. Henry looked at him, then back at me, with eyes so deep and steady they seemed to strip the fear from my bones, Victoria. Listen. He brushed his fingers across the back of my hand. I'm not protecting you out of obligation. A pause. I'm protecting you because I want to, because I can't stay on the sidelines anymore. The world seemed to fall away for a moment. Henry continued, I've arranged everything. Tonight we leave. I'll take you somewhere Ariana can't reach. I gripped his hand. Aren't you afraid this will make her even more unstable? Henry held my stare, then a small, dangerous, almost arrogant smirk tugged at his lips. She can go mad over anything she wants except me letting you be in danger. I stopped breathing. Henry leaned in, not touching my lips, but close enough that a single breath would change everything. He whispered, I'll face Ariana. I'll face my entire world. But not by stepping away from you, I whispered back. What if I'm scared? Henry pressed his forehead to mine. Then I'll be the reason you stop being afraid. The afternoon passed in frantic preparation. Suitcases, documents, Jamie's clothes, medicine, the car waiting in the garage. Henry checked everything, every detail, the way a man does when one mistake could cost more than his life. Before we left, he turned to me. Once we walk out that door, we don't come back. We don't look back. We just go. I nodded. But a question echoed inside my mind. By leaving this city, am I stepping away from the man Henry used to be, or stepping closer to the part of him he fears admitting the most? We left the building just as sunset was swallowing the last streaks of light from the city. Henry carried Jamie, and I held tightly onto the handle of a small suitcase. Just one, a few clothes, nothing more. He didn't let me bring much the lighter we travel. The easier it is to run, he'd said. I didn't fully know what we were running from, but I knew who I was running with. And strangely, that made the fear easier to bear. The underground garage was so quiet that even the tapping of Henry's finger on the car roof echoed sharply. A matte black SUV waited in the farthest corner, sinking into the shadows like a creature lying in wait. Henry opened the passenger door for me first. He buckled Jamie into the child seat, checking every latch, every strap, every clasp, then touched the baby's forehead with a tenderness that felt almost habitual. Only after he was sure Jamie was safe did Henry take the driver's seat. The engine came alive, strong yet smooth. The garage door lifted, revealing the long ramp leading up to the street, a ramp that felt like it demanded we leave everything behind. I drew in a long breath, clutching the seatbelt. Henry, where are we going? He kept his gaze forward, voice deep. Somewhere no one can find you, not even Ariana. Her name made a cold shiver run through me. Henry glanced my way, and his eyes softened just for a beat. Victoria, I'm right here. Such a simple sentence, yet it struck something tender inside me. We merged into the thin evening traffic. Fog thickened around us. The road stretched endlessly. The skyscrapers receded in the mirrors, their lights smearing across the glass until they vanished. replaced by dim street lamps and the dark silhouettes of trees. Jamie slept soundly. I wanted to believe things would be fine, but unease crept in. Because Henry was driving at a stable pace, yet gripping the wheel so tightly the knuckles had gone white. "You're worried, aren't you?" He didn't deny it. "She won't let this go." His voice was slow, controlled, and the fact she appeared earlier than I expected means someone told her more than they should have. "Who?" Henry shook his head, his expression dark enough to chill my skin. "Someone on my side, or hers, or worse. Both." I fell silent. In his world, the line between ally and enemy was thinner than paper. The SUV turned off the highway, taking a secondary road. The city lights dissolved completely, swallowed by forest. For a long stretch, only the hum of the engine and the rustle of wind through the trees filled the air. Then Henry spoke abruptly. "Do you think I'm dragging you into trouble?" I startled, not expecting him to ask that. "I don't know," I admitted softly. "But I know I don't want to go back to that city, not to that apartment, not to face that woman alone." Henry nodded slowly. "And I don't want you to be alone." In that moment, I didn't see the cold man from the news, not the one who commanded with a glance. Just a man trying to hold on to something precious, afraid it might slip from his hands. The wind picked up. The sky darkened with the threat of rain. The road ahead narrowed into a mountain pass, steep slopes on both sides. I tightened my grip on the edge of the seat. "Are we close?" "1 more hour," Henry replied. I wanted to ask where exactly, but before I could, he glanced at the rearview mirror. Something in his posture shifted tension tightening along his shoulders. My heart skipped. "Henry." He didn't answer. He turned the wheel slightly, guiding the SUV into another lane, a defensive maneuver. I looked behind me. Headlights. A car in the distance, 2 sharp yellow beams cutting through the fog, gaining speed. Henry murmured, "Tail." My blood froze. "Ariana." "No. She doesn't drive like this." His voice hardened. "This is one of her men." The car accelerated, headlights flaring across our rear window. Henry immediately switched lanes again suddenly, sharply. I grabbed Jamie to steady him. "Henry." He didn't look at me, but his calm voice steadied my racing pulse. "Trust me." The car behind us closed in, close enough that I could make out its license plate not from this city. Henry reached into the side compartment and pulled out a compact black gun. I felt the world snap back into the reality of his world, the one we all think we could handle, until it stands right behind us with headlights blazing. "Henry, don't do anything reckless." "Jamie." He cut in, his voice slicing clean through panic. "I won't let anyone hurt you. Either of you." The engine behind us roared. Henry pressed the accelerator. The SUV shot forward fast enough that my back slammed into the seat. Jamie woke with a jolt, crying hard. I clutched him tightly, whispering, "It's okay, baby. It's okay. I'm here." Henry flicked his gaze toward the crying child. His expression changed instantly, no calculation, no coldness, only one thing: keep them safe. Suddenly, a flash of white light burst behind us. Then a loud crash, metal striking rock. The car behind had accelerated and rammed into our rear bumper. The SUV shook violently. Jamie screamed. I screamed. Henry. His reflexes were terrifyingly fast, the instinct of a man who'd lived half his life on the edge of death. He jerked the wheel, pulling the car toward the wider section of the road to steady us. "Hold Jamie tight," he shouted. I clutched the baby against my chest. But the pursuing car didn't back off. It sped up again. Henry checked the mirror one last time, then twisted the wheel, braked sharply, and instantly hit the gas again, a maneuver so complex only someone highly trained could do it. I didn't understand what was happening. All I saw was this. The other car shot forward too fast, swerved, hit loose gravel, and then crash. It veered off the edge of the mountainside, rolling, falling, lights spinning in the darkness. Until everything went silent, Only our ragged breathing filled the SUV. After what felt like an eternity, Henry turned to me. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, still trembling. Jamie hiccuped, face red, clinging to me tightly. Henry stared at him, and his expression shifted. Fury gave way to pain, then to unshakable resolve. He spoke slowly, each word weighted. "We can't wait until tonight anymore." I swallowed hard. Then, what do we do? Henry extended his hand. For the first time, he didn't hide the fear trembling under the adrenaline. "We go now." Not 1 second later, I placed my hand in his warm, strong, but trembling ever so slightly. He squeezed gently. "Victoria, this is the line," I whispered. "What line?" Henry met my eyes with a look I knew I would never forget. "The line between your old life and the life I'll protect with everything I have." The SUV sped forward, leaving behind the lights tumbling down the cliff, and I knew from this moment on, there was no turning back. The road into the forest finally opened up a pale ribbon of light, cutting through the remnants of night. After the chase along the mountain pass, Henry hadn't stopped driving for hours. No complaints, no sign of exhaustion, only iron focus on the wheel, and on the two of us. When night finally surrendered to the first glimmer of dawn, we arrived in front of a wooden cabin nestled beneath towering old trees. No one spoke. We didn't have to. Henry turned off the engine. The sound faded, replaced by the distant calls of early morning birds. I looked at him, his face worn, a shadow of stubble from the sleepless night, dark circles under his eyes, yet his gaze remained sharp, alert, fixed on us like we were the only place he could not afford to let his guard down. "We're here," he said quietly, and in his eyes, I saw something, a decision he had been holding inside all night. The cabin was small but sturdy. Henry checked the perimeter one last time before letting Jamie and me inside. I laid Jamie on the bed and covered him. He slept peacefully again, breaths steady after the nightmare of the previous night. I stood by the window, watching dawn spill across the clearing. The soft gold brushed my hands like a promise someone had placed gently against my heart. Behind me, footsteps approached slow, heavy. I turned. Henry stood in the doorway, not crossing the threshold. The dim light angled across his face. "Victoria." I knew instantly what he was about to say, and that it wouldn't be easy. "There's something I need to tell you before things go any further." I stepped out of the room and closed the door, keeping Jamie undisturbed. "Henry, you don't have to," he shook his head. "No, I have to, because I pulled you out of your life, and if you choose to keep walking with me, you deserve the truth." I fell silent. Not out of fear, but because I had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Henry drew a deep breath, like a man removing armor he'd worn his whole life. "The brother I told you about. He didn't just die because of me." I clenched my hands. Henry continued, voice low with pain. "He died because I didn't choose him. Because I chose power. Chose this world. And when I finally realized family mattered more than everything else, it was too late." He bowed his head. His broad shoulders still looked strong, but now he appeared like a man standing at the edge of something he'd run from for years. From that day on, I swore I would never let anyone else pay the price for my mistakes. Silence spread across the cabin. Only the whisper of wind through the pines remained. I stepped closer. Henry didn't lift his head, didn't look at me as if he was certain I would retreat. Turn away, recoil from the wound he'd just revealed. But I didn't. I cupped his cheek, forcing him to meet my eyes. His gaze dark, deep, trembling was the gaze of a man who had finally allowed himself to be vulnerable. I whispered, "Henry, you didn't lose your brother because you chose wrong. You lost him because you were young. Because you didn't know how to protect the people you loved. Because you're human." Henry looked at me as if the ground beneath him had shifted. "Victoria, I don't want you paying for my sins. I shook my head. No one here is asking you to be perfect. Something flickered in his eyes. Maybe sunlight. Maybe something he never allowed himself to feel. Henry stepped back slightly, like he was afraid emotions might go too far. But I didn't let him retreat. Henry, last night, yesterday, and the days before you protected Jamie and me in ways no one ever has. I placed my hand over his chest where his heartbeat thudded hard, fast, vulnerable. And now, if you think I'm going to walk away from you for my safety, you're wrong. He froze. I held his gaze, steady and unflinching, because for the first time in so many years, I feel like I belong somewhere. A breath shuddered past his lips. I continued softly, firmly. And that place isn't a city. It isn't an apartment. It's beside you. Henry closed his eyes for a long moment in which I heard the sound of him swallowing hard. Then he opened them. And the look there was so beautiful it made my heart lose its balance. No shadows, no denial, only the truth he could no longer hide. Victoria, I tried to fight this feeling. I whispered. What feeling? Henry stepped toward me. Just one step, but it erased the distance between us completely. His voice dropped to a breath, rough and intimate. The feeling of loving someone so deeply. I forget what I used to be. My heart jolted so fiercely I felt it in my throat. He lifted my face in his hand, not possessive, not forceful, but with the reverence of someone touching something they never believed they deserved. Victoria, I love you. The confession wasn't loud, not dramatic, just quietly, devastatingly real. I answered without hesitation. I love you too. Henry didn't kiss me right away. He simply looked at me as if he couldn't believe fate would give him one more chance at something this pure. Then he pulled me into his arms. Not a desperate embrace, not wild passion, but the embrace of someone who had finally found home after too many winters. I buried my face against his chest, listening to his heartbeat strong, steady, anchoring. We were exactly where we needed to be. When I looked up, Henry leaned down and pressed a kiss to my forehead. Slow, warm, full of meaning. From today on, you don't have to run, he murmured. Because I will stand in front of everything, even the darkness inside me. I wrapped my arms around him. Then let's step into the light together. Henry smiled, truly smiled for the first time since I had known him. It lit the entire cabin. In that dawn with Jamie sleeping safely, the city far behind, and danger fading into distance, I knew our new life had begun. A life not perfect, not gentle, but ours. And Henry Sullivan, the man the world called dangerous, was the one who placed his entire heart into my hands. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.